Hi folks, this is Jake. We're looking at this book, Evidence Demands a Verdict, and we're looking at Eastern mystical world. Since most mystics deny dualistic worldview, such as right versus wrong or truth versus error, the evidence for one's faith is unimportant to the mystic. The danger of Eastern mystical outlook, then, is the avoidance of information that leads one to a true knowledge of God. Norman Anderson defines mysticism in the general term: mysticism represents the belief and direct knowledge of God, a spiritual truth or ultimate reality, is attainable through immediate intuition or insight, in a way of different from ordinary sense perception or the use of logical reasoning. Anderson tells us how Zen reaches this knowledge of ultimate reality. Zen Buddhism believes that by rigorous self-discipline and strictly prescribed method of meditation, they may attain a satori, the Japanese term for enlightenment, whether suddenly as some teach, or gradually as others hold, by means of perception which is empirical rather than intellectual. One writer says, now under the influence of Eastern mysticism, many people today would deny that systematic consistency is a test of truth. They affirm that reality is ultimately logical, or that logical contradictions correspond to reality. They assert in Eastern thought that absolute or God or the real transcendence, the logical categories of human thought. They are apt to interpret the demand for logical consistency as a piece of Western imperialism, which ought to be rejected along with the vestiges of colonialism. I am inclined to say frankly that such positions are crazy and unintelligible. To say that God is both good and not good in the same sense, or that God neither exists nor does not exist, is just incomprehensible to me. In our political correct age, there is a tendency to vilify all that is Western, and to exalt Eastern modes of thinking, or at least equally valid if not superior to Western modes of thought. To assert that Eastern thought is seriously deficient in making such claims is to be a sort of epistemological bigot, blinkered by the constraints of the logic-chopping Western mind. Craig. I agree with Craig. Ravi Zachariah tells a story that illustrates the futility of Eastern mystical both and line of argument. As the professor waxed eloquent and expounded the law of non-contradiction, he inevitably drew the conclusion: this either-or logic is a Western way of looking at reality. The real problem is that you are seeking contradiction as a Westerner when you should be approaching it as an Easterner. The both and is the Eastern way of viewing reality. After he belaboured these two ideas in either or, both and, for some time, I finally asked if I could interrupt his unpunctuated train of thought and raise one question. I said, "Sir, are you telling me that when I am studying Hinduism, I either use the both and system of logic or nothing else?" There was a pin-drop silence for what seemed an eternity. I repeated my question: "Are you telling me that when I am studying Hinduism, I either use the both and logic or nothing else? Have I got that right?" He threw his head back and said, "The either or does seem to emerge, doesn't it?" "Indeed it does emerge," I said, "and as a matter of fact, even in India we look both ways before we cross the street. It is either the buzz or me, not both of us." Do you see the mistake he was making? He was using the or logic in order to prove the both and. The more you try to hammer the law of non-contradiction, the more it hammers you. Ravi Zacharias. I thought that was a brilliant point. Yeah, you'll get a lot of skeptics and postmodernists and Eastern thinkers will say that, will say we don't need the law of non-contradiction. But you need the law of non-contradiction to say that we don't need the law of non-contradiction.